Glad y'all are here today. Wanted to kind of welcome everybody and make sure we're, kind of understanding that this is kind of our annual meeting. Once a year, we try to pull together all the different things that are happening. And we appreciate Barbara Osborne, who's been doing a yeoman's job in keeping us all in check and up to date with board meetings, committee meetings, and all that throughout the year. I really appreciate her work and all that she's done for the organization administratively. So I wanted to start with that, and also wanted to start with a kind of just we've all kind of looked back at 2020 as kind of a year we want to forget or get rid of and move on and get away, mostly because of the COVID situation. But our estuary and all the environmental issues that surround us are constantly with us, whether we have a pandemic going on or not. And we've had to kind of go to virtual meetings. A lot of us are attending almost all the meetings virtually by the governing board or the Corps of Engineers, the periodic science meetings. So it's a lot of meetings virtually and not a lot in person. But I still think it's a value, and I still think there's a lot that got worked through and done. We're going to talk about some of that today through the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual process, the LOSM process the Corps is going through to come up with another lake regulation schedule. That we were going to have Corps of Engineers be at the program today, but instead they couldn't make it. So we're doing a NOP program that I think Eve Samples is going to lead us on, and I think it's going to be a good summary of things. But as far as this past year, I look at the water quality in our estuaries. It started in June of last year, starting to get pretty bad, and then we had a little bit of recovery, but then right around October or so, the lake was being high, and the Corps started discharging a lot more, and of course went through this transition discharge period, trying to do pulse releases from December 10th through January 9th. And that month, we still continued to get a lot of discharges and releases from Lake Okeechobee into the estuary, which kept the salinities very fresh and unfortunately affected a lot of our oyster reefs and seagrass beds and other habitat in the estuary. But now, since they've discontinued those releases and we're in the dry season, obviously, we're starting to get kind of recovery into the estuary. So the last week's grade in our water quality testers was up to about a B. And so it's looking pretty good throughout the whole estuary, even up in the South Fork. I was up there the other day and even started to see the oyster beds exposed at low tide. We're looking okay. So we're hoping we can kind of keep those discharges at bay. There's a lot of things coming out right now with what's called a deviation schedule that Colonel Kelly's going to be talking about coming up at the Everglades Coalition Conference next week. And so it's may start on February 1st, where they can deviate from the schedule and allow more releases in order to protect the lake and protect the dike. So we got to keep an eye on things and keep an eye on going. I know many of the organizations have been really effective at getting things done and keeping on top of things like legislation or these rules that come out to allow those pesticides that we were just talking about, or herbicides that can affect our waterways. So I appreciate each and every organization independently of the coalition staying on top of those things and then reporting back to us once a month. Barbara's put together, our board list was at the end of we had our annual board meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we re-elected our members and officers of the board of directors. We have 12 members of the board, and we have 11 so far that are on the board. We have basically the board members that were listed, and you can see them at the bottom of your the agenda, I believe. So it's let me see if we can get that up.
I'll do that right now.
Okay, if you can. Yeah, so we're we have a
it was
great
on the
board.
On the
Go ahead.
newsletter, not the agenda.
I'm sorry, you're right. It's at the newsletter at the bottom. So I'll just read off our board members. Most of everyone's on the call right now. Myself has been reelected as president for another term. Charles Grande is vice president, Jim Moyer is secretary, and Daryl Brand is treasurer. We have directors as Mike Connor, Eve Samples, Nicole Mader, and those are 11 members total. We do have one vacancy left. We had 2 members leave, Chris Maroney and also Kenny Hinkle. So we fill one of those with Eve Samples. We're glad that she's part of our board and has been very active in helping us organize a lot of workshops and meetings with other groups. So I'd like to just kind of, recognize the fact that your board meets once a month and also and goes through a lot of the detail of formulating positions and taking what we had at a meeting and putting it into action. And I appreciate Daryl and others at keeping up on administratively on all the different things we have to do as a 501c3 organization and work through that. The board also has committees, and we have the executive committee. The nominating committee is Mike Connor, Charles Grande, and Nick Mader. So if you have or are interested in serving on the board, please get your name into or a name into Mike Connor as our chair of the nominating committee. Jim Moyer heads up our program and meeting committee. Charles heads up our strategic action and legal policy committee. And then Daryl heads up our finance and fundraising. And thank you very much for all the contributions that have been coming in. Nick Mader is our chair of the River Kids Committee. And Todd Weissing, as you've heard many times, is our Speakers Bureau and kind of our membership committee. And then our events chair and volunteer committee, we're still looking for a chair for that. But Barbara's been filling in and helping. We haven't had big events, right? We haven't had a rally for the rivers. We haven't had things like that come up. So, we're still, again, having to do a lot of things virtually and be in there. So my hope for 2021 is that we can really see an improvement in this, this coronavirus pandemic, that we can feel more comfortable at coming out and maybe doing small gatherings. There have been a lot of still beach cleanups, waterways cleanups, oyster restoration bagging. There's been a lot of smaller volunteer events that people have gotten involved in to help our environment. And I certainly really appreciate that. So we can get together, hopefully in smaller groups as we move forward and do some things for that. So if you ever have any questions, thoughts, concerns, or situations, please feel free to contact me. My email address is obviously available, and I'm mostly reached by cell phone, which is the best way to reach me. So I appreciate looking at that. I want to, I guess, turn it over to Daryl for a brief kind of financial update, and Daryl, and give us the kind of balances in the accounts and where we are at this.
Well, yeah, I get a little feedback here. Rivers Coalition, as Mark mentioned, is a 501c3. Our accounting is based on a calendar year which ended December 31st of 2020. And our financial filings can be viewed at the state of Florida's sunbiz.org. If everybody could mute their mic, I'm hearing a little feedback. We have a new CPA, Fred Doulis, who has been an avid boater and river advocate for many years in Port Salerno. For the year of COVID 2020, the Rivers Coalition was fortunate that our profit and loss was only in the red by actually $4,003. Although our income was down considerably, we also had limited expenses. We were unable to hold our public meetings in the Stewart City Hall chambers, and our event participation was basically non-existent. The 4th edition printing of the River Kids Workbook was delayed for a year. We are still able to circulate the workbook by downloading from our website or contacting Barbara in our office. Some specific recognition for generous donations. were, unfortunately, we had 2 deaths within our organization. We had contributions in the memory of George Sharrow and Dennis Phelan. We also had Tyler Treadway's annual Stewart News 12 Days of Christmas, Harbor Ridge Yacht Club, Sullivan Foundation, Richard Geisinger and the Stewart Boat Show producers gave a nice donation from parking at the Stewart Boat Show. James Emmesberger, he had continual monthly donations. Of course, we had Blessing the Fleet and donations from such birthdays as Kathy Olson and Cindy Lenz. We want to thank you to all the other individuals not mentioned here. We also want to give special thanks to the City of Stewart for your support by offering your City Hall chambers for our public meetings. And of course, we're itching to get back in there. We continue to hold prudent reserves to advocate and fulfill our mission statement. Our mission is to stop discharges into the St. Lucie River from Lake Okeechobee and to fight for a safe, healthy, and ecologically balanced St. Lucie River estuary and Indian River Lagoon, and the natural resources that are vital to the economy and quality of life of Martin County and the Treasure Coast. Thanks to the 104 member organizations for your participation, and we represent well over 400,000 individuals. And as I mentioned earlier, at sunbiz.org, you can find our financial filings in 990. So that's my report. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. Appreciate that very much. I also want to mention that I know that we have quite a few obviously participants on on the meeting today, over 54 that I'm seeing right now. Several are guests, and then we have of course our member organizations. And what I thought we'd do at this annual kind of event too is ask that all coalition members, we're going to send out the roster or the kind of listing of all the members and their contact information, who the delegate is, representative, and the email and contact info, et cetera. And we'd like, Barbara will send that out to all the members and we can get that updated. I appreciate that. I think last reported, Daryl, right, we were at over 105 member organizations. So that's really impressive. And what we want to do is make sure we represent correctly. We put out the roster, get your feedback on, do we have the correct information and can we move this forward? So, and I also appreciate all the guests attending today and all the visitors attending today, because we do have a lot to cover and we're interested in your input as well. So we appreciate that. I'd like to kind of move on then to our feature kind of report. Eve Sample's done a great job in pulling together a couple of workshops, as I mentioned earlier, that, with the different groups, particularly the City of Stewart and Martin County. And we looked at how we can effectively look at managing Lake Okeechobee and what the whole LOSM process means. And from that, we thought, since we couldn't get the Corps to commit today, and I did get a call from Lieutenant Colonel Polk, by the way, who apologized again for Tim Geisen and others who couldn't attend. They do have too many meetings, I think, going on for LOSM. If you attended all 6 or 8 sub-team meetings and all the LOSM PDT meetings, I don't know how anybody keeps up with it. I can see Paul Gray kind of, yeah, it's just like tough to keep up with. So I know many of us try, and we try to keep up with all the technical details, but I think in today we're going to be doing this presentation to kind of bring it down to a level we can all grab a hold of, and I think put into perspective what can we all do to work on a schedule for the lake and other water management conditions, either the Corps or the district, to help minimize or eliminate those discharges from Lake Okeechobee and other water flows into the estuary. So I really appreciate Eve to put this together today, and I'm going to turn it over to her. And then of course we'll follow with our governmental agent and agency reports. I see Jackie's on the phone. Appreciate her being on for the district and others, and some other reports from our own committees like Nick Mader and others. So let's get Eve Samples. Thank you very much. If you want to pull together, are you
Thanks.
ready to go?
Thanks, Mark. I am. I think I'll need permission to share my screen. If Daryl can grant that, that would be wonderful.
I think you should be able to go ahead, try it now.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me make you a co-host then. Sorry.
And while
about
we're waiting
that.
on that, is Blair on the line? He's going to be joining us.
I just allowed screen sharing, so it should work now.
You did?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
I
great.
don't see his name listed
I
here.
don't see him either. So, okay, well, hopefully he will be popping in. So thanks, everybody. I'm Eve Samples. I'm a new board member of the Rivers Coalition, longtime listener, if you will. And we're going to be trying to break down what's happening with the LOSUM process, the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual, so that we can communicate with all of our member organizations and re-engage the public in a powerful way, because we have an important opportunity right now to call for an end to the discharges to the St. Lucie estuary. And we're going to explain why this is such a critical moment and how you all and all of the folks that you represent in your respective organizations can help us out. So I'll start by giving an overview of where this lake management plan process stands right now. I'm going to kick it over to Mark to talk a little bit about the specific plans and how we can push for one that really stops the discharges to the St. Lucie estuary, which of course is a key mission of the Rivers Coalition. Blair, hopefully he'll join us. He's going to weigh in for a bit about this once in a decade opportunity. And then I asked both John Mayle from Martin County and Merritt Matheson from Stewart to talk about how their government organizations are participating in this process, respectively. So with that, I am going to share my screen. And by the way,
Blair is up, so he's on.
Blair's on. Thanks.
Okay, great. Hey, Blair, just in time. I'm not in the middle of the cultural courthouse right now, and I don't have 5 Clyde Butchers in my home. This is a virtual background, but please try to get to that exhibit. It's remarkable. And we'll be doing an artist chat with Clyde Butcher on February 11th. You can go to everglades.org if you're interested in that. All right, so with that said, I'm going to share my desktop, and we're going to go from the really beautiful Clyde Butchers to this image of toxic algae that many of you will remember from 2018. And this photo credit goes to Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch. Thank you for documenting this, Jackie. So right now, the Army Corps of Engineers is in the midst of its Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual process. And that is an effort to improve the quite flawed current Lake Okeechobee Management Plan, LORS 2008, that stands for Lake Okeechobee Regulation Schedule. And that terrible schedule was developed after Hurricane Katrina, when the Army Corps of Engineers was nervous, understandably, about structures breaching, and it really led to discharges that made the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee estuaries suffer. And let's see if I can advance this. This is what it got us. This is our current Lake Okeechobee management and what it's looked like too many years. And I know you all are familiar with this, but I think it's just worth revisiting, because our water hasn't looked like this for the last couple of years. But all of the elements continue to exist for a repeat, and the Lake Okeechobee plan that's being considered and devised right now could prevent this from happening in the future. It's a really important time for us to weigh in and pay attention. And you'll recall too the avoid contact with blue-green algae signs that were posted during those toxic algae blooms of 2018 and 2016. And we know a whole lot more now about the risks of blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, than we did in 2008 when LORS 08 was developed by the Corps. So there's really no excuse for not taking public health risks into full account in this lake management plan. All right, so this is where the presentation is going to get a little bit wonky, and I'm going to try to break it down for everyone so that you can understand how you can effectively weigh in. So as Mark mentioned, there have been many, many, many meetings led by the Army Corps of Engineers and the Water Management District, and other stakeholders, government agencies are part of this process, including the agricultural interests that really benefited from the current Lake Plan LORS 08. And the process so far has entailed, recently I should say, has entailed looking at all of these sub-objectives and isolating them to see how plans would perform if, for example, you pulled one out and you only looked at the St. Lucie estuary ecology and you maximized for that, what would happen to all of the other categories? So I know this is an alphabet soup here, but these are the different categories the Army Corps of Engineers has been looking at over the past couple of months, isolating for them. And it's been something of an academic exercise. And now they're going to be moving into a phase where they evaluate realistic alternatives that they could be implementing. So zooming out again, this whole process started back in 2018. The Army Corps of Engineers went through a scoping process where it took public input on what this LOSUM process itself should look like. Then it just went through the formulation of all these different plans. They narrowed it down from 120,000 model runs to about 26,000. And then they evaluated the top few alternatives in each of these categories. So you see the "We Are Here" arrow. This was as of the Army Corps meeting on Monday. And the next 3 to 6 months are going to be extremely critical because the Army Corps is going to be developing what it's calling balanced plans. And we've seen through some of the work so far that when you stop discharges to the St. Lucie, it's not as detrimental as you might think to the rest of the system. And there's really a reasonable way to accomplish that in the new lake plan. And it's definitely what we should all be pushing for. So you see here in the next 90 days, the Corps is going to have many more meetings. And I think one thing for the Rivers Coalition and all the members to think about is whether it would like to weigh in writing on some of these plans that are going to be narrowed down, and really, with all of its member organizations, put forth a powerful, unified voice for stopping the St. Lucie discharges. And again, I know these look like Rube Goldberg puzzles, but this is what the Army Corps does. And sometimes you wonder if it's intentionally confusing, right? I'd like to give the Corps more credit than that, but at the very least, it makes it difficult for the public to be involved in a meaningful way. And that's why we're presenting this to you today, because the time is now to really re-engage. So I bring this back because, gosh, remember when we could all like pack it in Stewart City Hall and raise our voices? We can't do that right now. This was just a year ago during a Stewart City Commission meeting when the commission was considering some legal action. But we can't do it in person, but we really have to do it virtually in writing during the next few months as the Army Corps is narrowing down its plans. We have made a difference so far. It's why the Army Corps through LOSUM is even considering plans that reduce or stop the St. Lucie discharges. It never even considered that in the past. So we have an opportunity to push forward on selection of one of those plans going forward. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mark, who also has been in on many of these meetings and has a really keen eye for what's happening. So Mark, would you like to jump in?
Well, sure, Eve, thanks for kind of setting it up. As a lot of us attending these meetings, and as Eve said, they've gone through 120,000 iterations, looked at modeling for 27,000 of these kind of plans and how balancing them out with these different objectives. Of course, our objective is basically we prefer having no discharges to the St. Lucie estuary, zero. So what effectively we want, and they have run these particular scenarios for what they call in 4C1, And, you know, there's a setup here that, yes, it keeps the lake high, or there raises the kind of the heights. Right now it's at 17.25 in zone A. But then, you know, but then the rest of the time it has a more balanced area. So they try to look at how is the lake going to be managed to stay within these boundaries. And if it goes beyond into zone A or zone B or zone C, which is now, you know, kind of a high, low, and medium bands, or low bands and base flow, they determine how much is going to be released, or how much they need to release in order to keep the dike safe, in order to keep a balanced approach to everything from water supply to flood control to navigation and recreation. So, you know, it's really critical that we all kind of understand each of the objectives, perhaps, and how it works, particularly, you know, for the lake or for the estuary. So in this particular run, this 4C1 through 3307, you can see all the discharge ultimate ends on the right-hand side are through S80, which goes from the St. Lucie Canal into the estuary, would be measured at 0 cubic feet per second CFS. So that
Mark,
0 cubic feet per second. Yeah.
Blair, I don't mean to interrupt, but Eve, are we supposed to start at 11:30?
I'm sorry.
No,
We started at 11, Blair.
Okay, this is live then.
Yep.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah. Yeah. So we're, you know, we're looking at this scenario and going, well, this looks pretty good for the St. Lucie estuary. And of course they have to weigh it against, well, what does this also balance out for the Caloosahatchee, or putting water south to the water conservation areas of the Everglades, or for recreation, navigation, flood control, and other things. So, but our kind of promotion, I think our work is to say, and we've seen this through the years, that we want 0 discharges. And in fact, the Rivers Coalition, we changed our kind of mission statement to be fighting for clean water in the estuary, but also for 0 discharges from Lake Okeechobee. None of this water needs to come to us. And if you look at the very bottom, even in our current areas of discharges, we used to have, you know, discharges that go a minimum to the Caloosahatchee, like 400 CFS and 200 CFS to the St. Lucie. And we've always said, well, send that 200 over to the Caloosahatchee. And they said, we need it right now during the dry season anyway. So they took 650 instead of, and 0 to the St. Lucie. So the Corps of Engineers has management. And I want everybody to notice in these schedules, when it says up to 0 CFS or up to 2200 CFS, that provides the Corps week to week to actually think about, well, what is the flexibility we have here? And they do have to get into some formal or even conditional, what they call deviations from this kind of schedule eventually. And they can do that from time to time, but they even have certain discretion within this schedules, or when these schedules get developed. So what can we do as Rivers Coalition members? I think that's kind of what I was kind of charged to say. We need to, not all of us can track in detail all of these runs and how they're going to flush out. But as Eve said, over the next 90 days through September, the Corps is going to go through this process with public input and try to come up with a plan. So we're kind of looking at our PDT, local PDT members, which is the planning development team. And there are 100 or so on there. But in our area, of course, there's our City of Stewart representatives, our Martin County representatives on that, which are here today. But also, you know, there are other representatives on the PDT. They're the ones that are going to be attending all of this and working with the Corps right up through. We can have public input, but we feel like we've got to have it also through the PDT members, which include some of the districts, some of the agencies like NOAA and EPA and others. So we've got to know who's in charge, who's working this process through, and be able to have that input. So as a coalition, whether we as a separate organization take action or as a group take action, I want us to really come together on the one voice, like we were saying. And I think the one voice is, we don't want any discharges or releases from Lake Okeechobee. So I'll turn that back over to Eve to follow up with, I believe, Blair. And,
Sure. Thank you, Mark. Agree 100% on zero discharges. And I think it's important to pull back the curtain a little bit on this process and these meetings. So we are definitely outgunned by the industry that has benefited from current management of Lake Okeechobee, meaning large industrial agricultural interests south of the lake, particularly sugar, because they've used the lake as a reservoir so that they have ideal irrigation during the dry season and ideal drainage during the wet season. And again, now that we know so much more about the health risks, we have so much more evidence of it. Many of you all have known for a long time that system is terrible the way it's operating now. But there's just no excuse to prioritize those benefits and implement such damage and risk to residents and our natural system. So we have a real opportunity moving forward. One thing that's worth noting is the recent WRDA bill, Water Resources Development Act bill, passed out of Congress, required that the Army Corps at least consider prohibition of releases to the St. Lucie and consider anything more than beneficial releases to the Caloosahatchee. And I weighed in during a call Monday and just really asked the Corps that they consider that as more than an academic exercise. And you know, they nodded and said, sure, we will. But the onus is really on us to remind them they have a congressional mandate to consider that and not just go through the motions, really see if they can make it happen. So I'm going to pass it over to Blair next. And Blair's going to talk a little bit about the STAs south of the lake and how we could get to zero discharges to the St. Lucie and not blow everything else out.
Hi, yeah, again, it's one of those things where this isn't new. We've known all along. Really, if you look at this, it's, you know, just a huge jumble of numbers. But what you're seeing, and we'll highlight it when we get closer to our recent past, if you'll move forward just a little bit, what you can see is the total releases to the STAs during the wet season, during the dry season, and then other STA inflows total to the STAs. And then the number at the bottom, the average that's highlighted, 2009 to 2019, you can see the average to the STAs at about 1.2 million acre feet. It's very difficult to deal with billions of gallons. It's hard to actually put that in perspective. The maximum amount of water that's allowed to be discharged into the St. Lucie estuary in one day is 11 billion gallons. So they could cover the city of Stuart in 6 feet of water in one day. That's the maximum. What this number, I think, all these numbers illustrate, if you look at the number going into the STA during the wet season and dry season. The dry season right in the middle here, 118,000 acre feet. What that number is coming from the St. Lucie estuary, what we can see in this is that essentially in 2013, 2016, 2017, 2018, our most recent history of terrible summers, the lost summer of 2013 was 136 billion gallons of water into the St. Lucie estuary. Converted to acre feet, which that's here, it's 418,000 acre feet. You know, the number that we're allowed, if you look back at the average total numbers into the STA at 1.2 million, 400,000. If we were allowed the number that you look in 2015, 580,000 acre feet. Again, 2015, 580,000 acre feet from the lake into the STAs. It's a show that we can do it. 2013 was 418,000 acre feet. 2016 was 727,000. 2017, 589,000. And I'm quoting the numbers that came into the St. Lucie estuary. In 2018, one of the worst ecological disasters of our time was 313,000 acre feet. If we took that water in and put it into a storage treatment area, the STA, we would not have had any discharges into the St. Lucie estuary in 2018. Those 4 years, 2016, 2013, 16, 17, and 18, basically equate to 42.6% of the total. If you look back again at that 1.2 million acre feet that flow into the STAs, these are publicly financed, publicly paid for, and we get essentially about 10%. So if we had 40% or 42%, we would not have had discharges in 2013, 16, 17, and 18, which is, this is crazy. These STAs were not built solely for the EAA. And if you go to the next slide, who's paying for them? I mean, this isn't a mystery or under the hood, behind the curtain type thing. I mean, we know that essentially 76% of the pollution is not coming from Disney. It's not coming from the Kissimmee. It's coming from agricultural runoff. Who's paying for it? Look at it. I mean, it's just a complete imbalance. If we could get to, we talk about shared adversity. That's what we need to talk about. If we can get to where we can get to half of the STAs for lake inflows into the STAs, we stop the discharges. So when we say stop the discharges, there is an answer to stop the discharges without blowing out the other parts of the system. Now, who may have to step up and share some adversity is in fact agricultural interests in the EAA. But that gets to today's, I don't know if anybody read today's commentary about, the lack of us using our dock stamps to buy conservation land. That's just a whole nother issue, but there's money out there to buy land. And if we were forcing the EAA to store and treat, in this case, treat their own runoff, we would find willing sellers in a heartbeat, but they're not being forced to do that. And so they like the fact that we are paying as taxpayers to treat their water, and which is really crazy. And I think right now we have the opportunity to do something about it. And I think there is some pressure. There is some. I even think there's some will potentially to do this. But this is, again, our opportunity. And this is in a release that was released today. Our congressman in District 18, Brian Mast, calls on Army Corps to seize once in a decade opportunity to stop discharges to the St. Lucie. If you see here, again, this is what we should be saying as an organization, and this is coming from our congressman. I think it would be unconscionable if the Army Corps selected a final plan that does not eliminate regulatory discharges to the St. Lucie. This is where we need to be fighting from, that single voice, stopping discharges to the St. Lucie. It's within our grasp. And thank you.
Thanks, Blair. And the once in a decade opportunity alluded to here, that's how often the Army Corps of Engineers reevaluates its lake plan. So the new one will take effect per those timelines I showed earlier in 2022. This is the time to really apply some pressure. So with that said, I'm going to ask if Merritt Matheson is available to say a few words about the City of Stewart's involvement in the LOSIM process. Merritt, are you on?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
So Eve, thank you. Blair, thank you. Mark, Thank you. The city of Stewart and Martin County have been involved in the LOSUM PDT process. And basically, you kind of touched on where we are now is every major stakeholder, the Corps working with three modeling picks of top modeling picks for those stakeholders. And there's going to be a lot of contentious meetings coming up in the near future, I would say, as they try and blend each of those top three models into one model that they'll move forward with. But that's where we could use some help from the Rivers Coalition. In my mind, flood them with public comment. And what I'm talking about is I'm talking about models that are optimized, best model runs for the St. Lucie estuary, top three models there. Best model runs for the Caloosahatchee estuary. Best model runs for water supply, recreation, navigation, South Florida ecology. And the two real points we all need to uniformly drive home that's already been touched on here are the St. Lucie needs zero discharges. And what the Corps is doing in this management process is trying to balance, a set of scales. And the problem is all discharges to the St. Lucie estuary are detrimental. We all know this, everyone on the call knows this, but we need to push that 110% with the Corps. Even that as the decision-making key that Mark Perry had up earlier in his presentation from LORS 08 still showed that the Corps has an impression that 200 CFS out of the S80 can somehow be beneficial to the St. Lucie estuary. And, for years now, we've been saying, send that to the Caloosahatchee. It does benefit them. And really what I mean by that is we need to drive that point home. All discharges to the St. Lucie estuary are detrimental. That water needs to go other areas where it is beneficial. And that's really, even Blair touched on that. That's not happening. A lot of years during the dry season, the Caloosahatchee is not getting the beneficial water that they need. And we all know that the Everglades is not getting the beneficial water flown south to them or to Biscayne Bay. And the other main point that we need to drive home is that we've seen that in the three model runs where we optimize St. Lucie estuary, the Corps' own models have shown us that we can almost achieve just by operational changes what we want. Blair was talking about send more water to the STAs from the lake and not from the EAA. But in their model runs, to put it in simplest terms, some of them they show a baseline of about 230, 240,000 acre feet annually discharged to the St. Lucie estuary. And that's a rough baseline over history. And one of the model runs that the city of Stewart picked that optimizes the St. Lucie estuary, and again, a similar one that Martin County picked, both show modeling that reduces those discharges down to 10,000 acre feet or a little more annually. So we're talking about a 20 times reduction of discharges with operational adjustment. And, that's what we're pushing for. And we need to push those models to have a major impact in when the Corps narrows it down to one model run to work with. So they've shown themselves that it can be done. And that benefit to us of that major discharge reduction reflects, very minimal adjustment to water supply. And it also shows some other benefits around the state where water needs to go. So if we can, uniformly push those 2 points, I think we can make some headway. One, that the Corps has shown that they can model significant reduction in discharges to the estuary just changes in operation. I'm talking 20 times reduction. And the two, that all discharges to us, everything they're doing, the scale is entirely detrimental to us. And yet they're adjusting pure benefit to other stakeholders. And so all we're asking is adjust the benefit a little bit to reduce the 100% detrimental effects of discharges that come to the St. Lucie. So, I know we have other speakers. I know we'd like to hear from John, or perhaps, I'm working on these PDT meetings on behalf of the city of Stewart with Ben Hogarth. We've been heavily involved, and it is a very time-consuming process. There's a ton of meetings, but I am confident, we need to speak up at this point. When they start blending these models optimized for one stakeholder and blending them all together, that our voice needs to be heard. So I'll turn
Thank you,
it back.
Merritt.
Thanks, Merritt.
We have heard your voice very clearly throughout this process, Merritt, and thanks to you and the city of Stewart for being so vocal about stopping the discharges. It's making a difference. And I think you made a great point just now about how when the Corps moves to these quote unquote balanced models, a balanced model cannot be a model that in which the St. Lucie takes it on the chin, right? It
Exactly.
really cannot be. And that's how it's been in the past. All right, so with that said, John Mayle, I believe you're short on time, but if you do still have a few minutes, we'd love to hear from you about what Martin County's doing to make sure the new LOSM plan is as protective of the St. Lucie as possible.
Sure, thank you, Eve. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I've shut off the two other calls I'm on, so you won't hear those in the background as well. Thank you for the opportunity. I think it's a wonderful idea for us to be sharing and taking advantage of the influence of the Rivers Coalition and its membership. So I'm gonna chime in on some, a lot of points that maybe you've already heard. Fortunately, the context has been fairly well laid out by yourself and others. So I'll jump right to points that seem to us to be the most effective points to be making from a public platform. Every time we have these conversations, we really come back to the same overarching objective that we are targeting zero discharge regime. And to that end, I think where we can probably have the greatest effect moving into the balanced array evaluation is public input that substantiates that position. We have the option of trying to argue over compromise, or saying, hey, this position of zero discharges is reasonable for us and for these reasons. So I've got a few that are that I've identified that are basic, digestible, and supportable positions. And what I guess what we're trying to do at the county with internally and with our consultants is to try and substantiate those with empirical analysis and modeling, diving into the modeling to find out where we have opportunities to make those arguments their best. So I'll just get to them. The first one, and a lot of these come back to our original scoping comments, and so some of them will be familiar, and I just think it's a perfectly appropriate time for the next 6 months to double down on these. So first of all, that we have no historical connection. Our connection to Lake Okeechobee is completely engineered. There was a ridge on the east side of what was Allapattah Slough, and that ridge divided the slough waters that would gradually flow north and south, and the water that came to the St. Lucie River and estuary was wholly local basin runoff. And that is a good argument because it's unique. There's no other stakeholders really that have a significant impact from the system that was completely engineered. A lot of these, and to that end, a lot of these that I want to list today are, I liken to it to like these puzzles that sometimes pick up and play with, that you try to solve some I don't know, my kids always have these little like wood and metal puzzles. And when you're trying to figure out a solution, you kind of push in different ways and pull in different ways. And once in a while something moves and you're like, okay, well, we have some movement here. Let's work on this piece. And so this list is kind of those things. Some of the things that we've pushed, you just kind of get a hard wall, but these have actually seemed to hit some soft spots with the core. The other argument that's already been made well is that we're one of the only stakeholders that have no benefit to participating in Lake Okeechobee water, where every other stakeholder has some benefit in the relationship, and ours is completely and entirely a damaging relationship. So as people that are kind of forced to participate in that relationship with the lake, we're the one group that has nothing to gain from it. And normally in a relationship, there's some give and take, and for the other stakeholders, that is true. It is not true for us. Another argument that seems to have gotten some traction is the one that our outflow has no natural treatment, where the other parts of the lake that receive water, there's at least some, if not significant, littoral shelf and vegetative treatment of that water to reduce nutrients, sediments, and harmful algal blooms. For instance, the Caloosahatchee, the other northern estuary that receives discharges, they oftentimes get about a 50% reduction in their nutrients from the pelagic zone, or the deep parts of the lake, to where the water goes into the Caloosahatchee, where our water comes straight from the pelagic zone, and we get zero nutrient reduction for the water that comes to us. Another factor that seems to have gotten some traction, maybe substantial traction, is our recent understanding of what happens to harmful algal blooms when they hit saline waters, and how that causes an accelerated mortality that makes the water more toxic as it releases the toxins in those algal blooms at a much faster rate, and it causes this coagulation of the harmful algal bloom as it comes into the saltwater environments, as it kind of resists the mortalizing effects of the salt water. We know that there's an increased human health risk to harmful algal blooms that discharge to saltwater than there is in freshwater. There's also no good time for us to get discharges, and we're getting better and better at making that argument and understanding the ecological sciences of dry season discharges. And it's not something that doesn't have its impacts. And in fact, I think an argument can and should be made that dry season discharges that impact the natural system are just as bad as a summertime discharge. So that's something that seems to have had some effect as well. The other thing that we've learned in the Pareto analysis is that the sensitivity of the system to changes in the S80 is not nearly as significant as the sensitivity of the system to changes in other places. And what's borne out from that is the model runs that we tend to prefer in the 4C1 category that have zero discharges except for in the extreme high lake circumstances. It does not move the needle in a negative way nearly as far for the Caloosahatchee, for water supply, for South Florida, for lake ecology, recreation, and navigation, as does changes or the preferred plans for some of the other stakeholders really moves the needle on ours. So if you're looking at the overall system, you're trying to improve the system in its entirety, there's kind of a return on investment to making kind of a small sacrifice everywhere to make a significant improvement on the St. Lucie estuary. I think it's an argument worth making when you talk about balancement. So another way to say that is, the improvement to the system versus the cost to the system. I think we have a efficient product in the 4C1 model runs to that end. The other thing that Commissioner Matheson has already brought up that I feel very strongly is a powerful argument for us to make is that we are arguing for reduced damages where most of the other stakeholders are arguing for improved benefit. And in publicly owned and operated system of shared resource, I think it's a worthwhile argument to make that before we begin to talk about benefits to people from a system, we should eliminate all the damage. So that's an argument that, you know, my staff and I have committed to making as often and as eloquently as possible. You know, this comes back to our unique role as only a damaging beneficiary or damaging recipient of water, is that you know, every other participant has a mixed participation in the system. You know, the Caloosahatchee really would like to have 1,000 CFS all dry season, and in their analysis of their differing needs as it relates to the lake, they concluded that their highest priority is getting dry season flows, that is more important to them and their ecology than reducing high and damaging flows in the wet season. You know, we're not anywhere close to making that kind of argument. Ours is so singularly focused on, you know, we don't want any of it. And there's never a good time for us to receive it. And then the last thing I want to make the argument to is that the scale. I think Blair and Commissioner Madison both talked about some of the percentage of change and the acre feet differences between some of the model runs compared to what our current status is. And, you know, we can talk about, you know, moving from 200,000 acre feet to, you know, 150,000 acre feet or 10,000 acre feet, just for reference. And I like to make this point clear to the core. The C44 reservoir in STA has a storage and treatment capacity of 60,000 acre feet. That costs $1 billion to build for us and for the federal government, the state of Florida. 60. So when we start to talk about moving that needle, you think it's important for us to keep that unit of measure in mind, that you know, it's not an insignificant number. You know, if it's moving from 200 to 140, that's the equivalent of $1 billion infrastructure project. And lastly, my last comment, if I have just another minute, every time we have these conversations about how to improve the system, and again, we seem to always come back to the same conclusion, that the system needs more storage, it needs more water quality treatment, and we need more conveyance south. This LOSM process, regardless of how it turns out, is going to be one of the most powerful illuminations of that fact. And I think it's something we need to remember in this home stretch and in the fallout of the new LOSM plan, that we need to really continue to be vocally in support of particularly the Indian River Lagoon South projects for SERP and all SERP projects, because truly, you know, the system as a whole, we are all part of it, and the true benefits to Everglades restoration aren't realized until we finish that suite of projects, and probably then some. That's all.
Hey, John, this is Blair. Can you, it broke up, your audio broke up a little bit when you gave the numbers for the C44. Can you just repeat that one time?
Certainly. I hope I wasn't breaking up too much. The C44 has 60,000 acre feet of engineered capacity. And I round up to $1 billion as the cost for the project.
That's the C44 reservoir project that he's talking about,
yes.
Not the C44 canal itself. So to be clear, yes. That's the C44 reservoir project that's under construction and not completed yet. The STAs are completed, but not the reservoir itself. And primarily that 60,000 acre feet of storage and treatment through the STAs was designed for the basin storage, basically in the C44 basin, and not necessarily to take care of Lake Okeechobee discharges. So we had to, through the whole process, had to keep reiterating that. But I think the scale, whether you're talking billions of gallons or acre feet, just the relative numbers is what is really important. And we can't continue to build billions of dollars of storage projects like these big reservoirs or STAs and ignore the fact that operationally we can do a lot to stop these discharges. So the operations of these facilities, including the operation of Lake Okeechobee and how that's managed, is really critical, as John said and others have said, in our moving forward as how we can stop the discharges. It's not just building another big regional project for billions of dollars, because you only get incremental storage or treatment of water.
Mark,
Sorry,
you
I
make a
didn't
great
mean to.
point about the operation of the C-44 reservoir. You know, we don't have enough detail in any of the alternatives yet to analyze that, but it's something we're going to want to be acutely aware of as they start to roll out balanced arrays, that we can get into the modeling and see what they do with that project, because it just wouldn't set well with us if it was largely used to treat lake water. You know, unless they're assuring us no discharges. I think I'd be willing to give them the C-44 reservoir if they did that.
All right, Eve.
I'll just wrap it up by saying there are going to be a couple of key moments for public comment coming up in the next couple of months. There will be a broader PDT, project development team meeting. So we on the Rivers Coalition board really want to make it easy for all of the member organizations to weigh in and engage, and stay tuned for more information from us on that. And with that, happy to wrap it up and hand it back to Mark. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Eve. And as Eve said at the end here, we want to get this information out to the member organizations. So not only individually, but we can come up with a collective response to the PDT meetings at the public comment period, or even in between, be able to send a position statement from the Rivers Coalition that works out. Martin County's done an excellent letter to the Corps so far about those meetings and which alternatives to look at and focus on. The city of Stuart, same way. So we can model kind of a response that we as a body, like the whole title of this talk is to try to speak with one voice about, you know, what's best for us in the estuary and how it can balance out with all the other objectives that the Corps has. So I appreciate Eve's work, and she's going to continue to help us formulate these positions from the coalition. So stay tuned, get involved and get engaged. Okay.
Thanks, Mark. There is a question in the chat from Jim Moore. When can we know which model run to support? Maybe John would be best to weigh in on when you think we'll have one of those quote unquote balanced models to voice favor of or not.
It's a good question, but it's imminent. You know, when they give us their schedules, they seem to always be in pencil because they only get pushed out further. But I would expect, you know, before the end of February, we'll have our first round of balanced arrays, and we'll have the opportunity not just to pick a model to support, but then and then how we could approve that model. Because my guess is the model that we will most like in the initial balanced array, we won't love it. We'll probably need to, you know, to suggest some enhancements to it.
That's a good point. They had on the 25th, this Monday, they had what they called a PDT sub-team for plan formulation. So they took those top three for each of the objectives, those top three alternatives, and tried to work through them and formulate some plans from those. And so what John's referring to is the next iteration of that, it's going to look to kind of narrow it down as to what plans work. And those of us who can stay tuned to that and cue in on it, we can maybe then weigh in as a coalition or let the members know, hey, what it is that this is going on. And like John said, now's the time to weigh in on it. Let's weigh in on it and have that voice. I think it'd be powerful from the Rivers Coalition, obviously, to the Corps. So thanks again, team. I really, really appreciate your efforts to kind of pull this together. And again, kudos and thanks to Eve for bringing that together. So let's kind of move in. We'll wrap up here with some government and agency progress reports. Martin County or City of Stuart, do you have any other additional comments very briefly? And if we don't, then we can go on to the Water Management District. I know Jackie's on the phone. So Martin County, City of Stuart, Diane.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Diane Hughes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a water quality update. The enterococcus levels, or the fecal coliform coming from humans and or animals, at the Roosevelt Bridge is in the moderate range, not poor, so there's no, you know, signs up yet or anything, but it is in the moderate range. And the Enterocockus levels at Sandsprit, Leighton Park, and Stewart Sandbar are in the good range. That's good for us. And the Jensen Beach Causeway and the Stewart Causeway were in the good range as of January 19th. The other numbers were from January 27th. Salinity at Manatee Pocket and Willoughby Creek is good ranges between 27 and 29. And then the south and north forks of the St. Lucie River are around 13 units. So not too bad. And anecdotal reports from people who have been doing kayaking and paddleboarding, and they've seen a lot of manatees and a lot of other stuff in the water, stingrays and stuff like that. So it seems like things are starting to recover since they stopped the discharges from the lake. The other thing that we have done, and last week we began a monthly monitoring project of 7 sites on the S1, the S2, and the S3 canals, as well as Mack Creek and Hog Creek. These are probably potential sources of nutrient pollution to the St. Lucie estuary as they are draining hundreds of acres of agricultural land. So what we're collecting data for is total nitrogen, total phosphorus, orthophosphate, ammonia, potassium, and the Enterococcus at those levels as well, salinity, pH, turbidity, and dissolved oxygen. And we're going to share all that water quality data with the South Florida Water Management District and DEP, and likely somehow we'll probably have that data on our website, I'm assuming at some point in time. I don't know when. That's all that I have for an update.
Thanks very much, Diane. Appreciate that. City of Stewart, Ben, do you have any additional information to share at this time? Or
Ben, yeah, I'd just like to mention, you know, Mark, you were there, but last week, the City of Stewart hosted City of Miami Commissioner Ken Russell, who is actually, we're lucky to have him. He was a Stewart native, and we toured our waterways and spent the day discussing water quality and, you know, in City of Miami and as well as, you know, St. Lucie estuary. And we're hoping, you know, that Miami and their commission can unite and join the argument that's going on right now. They haven't really been involved entirely in recent history in South Florida's water quality argument as much as they could be. And really, it simply boils down to the fact that City of Miami and Southeast Florida needs more water, and they intend to speak up about it a little more, to regenerate their aquifers, to fight saltwater intrusion, to fight hypersalinity in Biscayne Bay, and we want to give them all that water. So, you know, Commissioner Ken Russell and I are continuing the conversation. I spoke to him yesterday, and we hope to move that forward and get them involved in the LOSUM process and speaking up from down south in the name of water supply to regenerate the aquifers and mimicking nature's natural water supply to South Florida. A message that I think has been kind of shifted by other stakeholders in recent history. So that's...
Appreciate it. Hey, Ben, do you have any quick comments about things going on?
I was just going to add, as a reminder, that on February 8th, we'll be having one of our regular commission meetings starting at 4:30, but we'll have both a presentation and just a resolution item, just something to be aware of. There's a company that brought its, I guess, attention to Vice Mayor Matheson here about its technology to mechanically remove invasive species, but vegetation all around the lake, rather than using all traditional chemical substances to do so. There's a lot more of that that'll be on the our agenda system, so you can read up. They're called aqua culture. That's instead of aqua, it's AGUA, agua culture. And they'll be doing a brief presentation and we'll have a resolution on that. And it's something that we're just generally supportive of. It's a pilot project through DEP right now. And we're just generally supportive because if we can mitigate the amount of chemicals that are used around the lake, certainly anything will help towards water quality we'll support.
Excellent. All right, great. Moving on to South Florida Water Management District. Is Jackie still on?
Yes, can you hear me? I hope you
Yes.
can.
Great, great.
Good. Hello, everybody. My phone's getting ready to go dead, so I'm going to run through this. The South Florida Water Management District did not have a meeting in January. However, in December, the voting was for the water reservations, reserving the water for the Everglades Agricultural Reservoir. That's a huge fighting thing, and it passed. We voted for a curtain wall where the 8.5 square mile area is, so that more water can be sent south. If you want to know more about that, let me know. We approved our strategic plan for the second year as a new board. And it's very fulfilling to me that this plan speaks about climate change and sea level rise when only 2.5 years ago, you couldn't say those words at the South Florida Water Management District. And also, we had a ribbon cutting in January in lieu of our meeting for the Alapata Flats, which was a slough. And that very much benefits the wildlife and the St. Lucie River. The big thing we do need to keep in mind, and they're talking to us about it, and it will be brought up more in February, is they call it the Army Corps of Engineer HAB deviation, which means that they can release water starting in February, even this year, if they think that that's going to avoid having algae blooms in the following summer. So that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. We really appreciate your coming to the meeting and being able to report directly as a governing board member. And sure appreciate that. Other state or federal agencies, do we have any DEP, Corps of Engineers, or FWC folks on? I don't hear anybody. We'll talk to Paul Gray. Are you still with us, Paul?
Hi, folks. Yeah, I'm still here.
Hey, how about Lake Okeechobee up there?
Well, that's not the best news in the world. The lake is still above 15.5 feet, which means it's been above its stage envelope, the desirable levels in the lake, for 6 months now. The good news is it's within a few inches of it, so it's not 2 feet above it. It's just a little bit. But the projections are by June 1st, there's about a 50% chance we'd be somewhere around 14 feet. In a normal year. This is supposed to be a drier spring, and so there's about a 25% chance we'd be at about 13 feet. And 13 obviously would be much better to start the wet season than 14. The driest prediction is only down to 12 feet by summer. That would be better. If we wanted to try to get lower, we'd have to do massive estuary releases. Right now, the water conservation areas are still 6 to 12 inches above their levels. And so they're already drowning. And so the only way to lower the lake would be estuary dumps. So the Corps has not committed to how they're going to do it. I would not support massive releases because we don't want to kill your spawns in the spring of oysters and fish. We want to get the lake as low as we can, but it's going to be a compromise between trying to get the lake to a good level, but not kill the estuaries in the process. So it'll be an interesting spring. So wish I had better news, but that's just where we are right now.
Mark, do you mind if I just share my screen real quick? I have the current
Yeah.
lake conditions that pertains to what we're talking about now.
Yeah, I was going to do that too. Yeah, there you go.
This is from yesterday. So the lake is at 15.5, a little above. Luckily, we have no water coming east right now, but as Jackie and Paul alluded, this HAB deviation could allow the Army Corps to do releases in February to the east with the idea of lowering the lake and avoiding them if we have algae this summer. Friends of the Everglades just sent feedback on that to the Army Corps, reminding them that the St. Lucie doesn't want any discharges any time of year, the incremental reduction of the lake level would not be worth it. So we just are calling for maximum beneficial to the west and maximum flow south.
Yeah, great. That would be great. Yeah, so I, could share my, just briefly too, you can see this screen, this showing the current situation for today on January 28th. But you can see there's about 669 or CFS going to this Caloosahatchee. There is water going south through the S354, 351, and 352, but it's not, basically it's for water supply into the EAA. Every year from November through May, they take water supply from the lake south. No discharges going east or west. They do have some of the S12s open underneath Tamiami Trail in order to get water flowing south. So you see about 2,400 CFS. That's trying to lower the SW Water Conservation Area 3A. So they're trying to get that down. So there is capacity to try to move water south to the Everglades in the dry season, which it needs it. So as Paul said, the lake is still pretty high stage at this time, and we're hopefully evapotranspiration. There's a lot of evaporation coming off. There's not a lot of inflow because there's not a lot of rainfall driving inflow into the lake. So we're hopeful we can get that lake down potentially to 13 or even 12.5 feet by June 1st. That's the idea, to minimize those harmful discharges. So basically, I just wanted to kind of update everybody on that. Other Lake Okeechobee issues, Paul, or you want to bring up, or?
That's it for now. It's just
Okay.
kind of, how much we just really hope for a dry spring to help us as much as we can.
Appreciate you helping us and updating on that.
Yeah.
State and federal legislation, Charles brought up a Senate bill that's coming up, and I encourage everybody that we can track that. And if we find something that's pertinent to coming up through the state legislative session, which starts probably in March, the beginning of March, I believe March 6th, that's when the legislative session starts for 60 days. But right now they're meeting in committees, formulating bills. Some people might have attended the legislative delegation local meeting last week or so, but I encourage everybody to keep up on that. And if you find something that's important, send it to Barbara, and Barbara can send it out to the whole member coalition of why we need to track it. Let's quickly do some updates for Nick Mater. Let's start with you if you can for any River Kids updates. Or is Nick still with us? Not sure. She's on mute.
Sorry about that. First, I wanted to reiterate what Diane Hughes said about the manatees. There are so many manatees out there right now. Water quality has looked good. I'm out every week, with Dolphin Ecology Project. Lots of dolphins, but lots of manatees. So be careful in your manatee zones and really pay attention. And if you happen to see manatees in a main channel, just go slow and spread the word. Another thing on the River Kids workbooks, as everybody knows, we do have it online under the River Kids tab under riverscoalition.org. But I am starting to think about wanting to see if we could print some of them. I think it would be a good time to do that and to spread them around to, just have them out there, and so people can actually hold them and see them. Even if the school systems cannot pony them out, which they can't right now. I talked to Valerie Gaynor about that. I think we could still use the hospital. Jackie had a connection at the hospitals to distribute, and then some nature centers, and then we all could take some, and it may help, just get that out there even in a timely fashion before the LOSUM stuff. So I wanted to talk further about that with the board and maybe do a little update. Sabrina Glover can update it with her expertise and her computer skills, and then maybe have a few of the board members look it over and update it just a little bit this past year. Things have happened. So and other than getting together, we haven't done that yet. We're still thinking about it, but haven't put anything together because of COVID. So we'll just keep you posted.
Thanks, Nick. Really appreciate that. Todd Weissing, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm right here.
All right.
So the Speakers Bureau, the idea of the Speakers Bureau is to get our message outside of the Rivers Coalition. This was a great meeting. And the idea is all that we've talked about here, we need to have the population know it. We need to get the population engaged. And in order to do that, if there's any way that I can help or the Speakers Bureau can help, we're happy to do it. Obviously, we're under some restrictions as to where we can have meetings, how we can have meetings. But if your organization has a Zoom meeting, please invite us. Our next meeting that I'm attending is at Halpatioke. So we can do it. We just need the invitation from you. If you're a member of a fishing club or of a homeowners association, any organization that would like to hear today's message or all of our messages, we'd love to be invited. How do we get invited? Just go to the Rivers Coalition website and request a speaker, and we'll promptly get right back to you. So just an invitation. We'd love to be there. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate it. Seagrass, local issues and water quality, I kind of reported that things are looking a lot better, especially since we've had strong tides with the full moon tonight and with new moon 2 weeks ago. We've been having some good, strong tidal influence to the estuary. So the water quality is looking a lot better. We hope it stays that way for recovery of oyster, seagrass, and others. And talking about seagrass, Todd Thurlow or Jim, do you have some updates on seagrass update? And then we'll go to Indian River Keep.
South Florida Water Management District is now again surveying seagrass. I haven't seen much out there. Very, very dispersed patches of shoal grass. It's mostly ball bearings on the flats and macroalgae. And we may be looking at a shift in ecology from seagrass to macroalgae, which is going to require a big shift in the whole environmental ecology of the estuary. It's pretty grim.
Yep. Todd Thurlow, you have anything to add?
No, sorry. No, I don't really have anything else to add.
That's okay.
I haven't been out there, no new aerials or anything.
Yeah, so flowing into Mike Connor, Riverkeeper, you've been out on the water. What's happening?
Yeah, as far as LOSUM, all I can say about LOSUM is the Corps has been picking winners and losers for longer than I've been alive. Whether they're picking the winners and losers or their bosses are, we know that's a fact. And I'm pretty encouraged by the LOSUM process right now with the calls all summer. Thanks to all you that were on the calls, you know who you are. We really have a good unified voice and insisting on zero discharges right now. So I'm pretty encouraged by that. As far as activities right now, I have been on the water, did a sampling yesterday in 2-3 places. I was almost giddy when I saw the water at Hell's Gate. It was crystal clear, really beautiful, a lot of glass minnows. I saw snook on the bars from a dock. It was amazing. Wasn't even in my boat. And so the salinity there was about 27 parts on a falling tide, which is pretty encouraging. Right now with Indian Riverkeeper, we've kind of gotten ourselves into what's going to be a battle for fishing access, public access, Jensen Beach, Causeway, bridges. Back around the 3rd of January, I got 2 calls from members of my organization saying, hey, who closed the bridge? The county commission closed the bridge. I went down and found the DOT signs. Since then, I have been in touch with DOT. Since then, I've done public comment twice, once to the Martin County Commission, once at a MPO meeting 2 mornings ago, which kind of surprised them. I was in the room. I'm trying to keep the fire lit on this, saying right now for an update, we're proponents on public access. Why try to restore and preserve a lagoon if you're going to have people cut off, access cut off, whether you like fishing or don't like fishing? It's a dangerous precedent. Right now, I'm trying to get this. The DOT has agreed to take the closure signs down if a group like mine or another civic organization, even a group of volunteer anglers, will go into a memorandum of understanding or a contractual agreement that we'll try to turn it around. I have a couple commissioners that are in favor of a 90-day pilot project, if I may call it that. I have one commissioner in the district up there who's dead set against us even trying it. And I won't mention names. It's the district, it's Jensen Beach, but we are going to try to take this, put this on the agenda for the February meeting. And we need a lot of voices in that room. But whether you fish or not, this is public access. What's next? A shoreline, a beach that might have some trash. What's happening there, and Merritt Matheson can go into detail. He's been a great help. Is a law on the books against littering has not been enforced. And now they want to layer another law on top of an unenforced law, a law saying you can't even be here to do that activity. So we're going to go after this, and hopefully we'll set an example and try to keep access to the lagoon. That's the basic lesson here for everybody. We had a great results from TC Palm. 12 days of Christmas. We got new tires to the in-river kipper truck. We got a trailer parts. The trailer is being rebuilt as we speak, and I'll be able to do a lot of mapping on the water. My plan is the next couple months, the water is so clean and clear, to do a lot of photography underwater and above water, showing exactly how much grass we've lost. And I don't need to tell anybody. I know we're concerned with our southern end of the lagoon, but the north end of the lagoon, there's places in Banner River there is no grass, has been no grass for years, and may not be any grass for years. You talk about regime changes. That's what's happening in Biscayne Bay. We're turning into from a seagrass regime to a macroalgae ecosystem, and that to me is tragic. And I looked at the northern western shoreline 3 days ago up near Fort Pierce from a couple of docks and neighbors let me walk on, and I'm looking at bare bottom out past the dock tees. I'm looking at bare bottom where there was grass 4 and 5 years ago, and that's pretty far removed from the discharges. So we know what the discharges does to Sailfish Flats, the vicinity from Jensen south, but what in the world is going on in the lagoon from Fort Pierce to Sebastian and beyond? Even near the inlets where there's great flushing going on, we're losing seagrass by the acre. And I'm talking about Fort Pierce Inlet Flats. I'm talking about Sebastian Inlet Flats. It's disappearing. Disappearing. A lot of folks are coming back saying, I think it's Roundup. And who knows? We're going to look into Roundup, glyphosate, all herbicides. Coming up this month, I'm going to do a seagrass panel. EVCO starts next week, February 2nd, mark the 37th year, 36th year. I've been asked to be on a seagrass panel. It's all virtual, folks. You can go to evergladescoalition.org and you can register for it. I think it's like $75 to do it right from your house. You got 4 or 5 days of great information. I'll be doing a seagrass panel, I believe, on Thursday of that week with some very, very good folks. So I'm pretty happy about that. Speaking of seagrass, there is one project going on by, believe it's Sea and Shoreline LLC. They are doing a seagrass planting. They're almost done just north of, I think, Little Jim Key, Little Jim, right there by the Fort Pierce Inlet. They have caged seagrass, and they're going to do, watch this grass, see how it survives. They have to cage it to keep it from being eaten by manatees, stingrays, uprooting it. So I'm going to go see that project in about 2 weeks with one of my board members, Peter Hink, who does quite a bit of video work up in Sebastian on seagrass loss up there. So I'm looking forward to see what they're doing and see what the results of 2 years of that grass planting is. Jim Moore may know a lot about that project. I think he knows those folks, but they will also, Carter Henney is one of the owners of that project and that company. He will be on the seagrass panel with me. So I look forward to learning a lot from him. And that's about all I have right now.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks so much. We've been out and about. I just mentioned too that Florida Oceanographic has a seagrass nursery. We have 5 species that we're propagating over there, and used a lot of volunteers to collect fragments, propagate seagrass, and then we nursery it out to some of the spots that we're doing oyster and seagrass restoration and living shoreline. So we're trying to combine the habitat restoration efforts. And Lorraine Simpson's doing work on that through Florida Oceanographic here. So other member comments for right now, if we have any. I saw there was some interest in the chat about the Senate bills and things like that. So hopefully, and thank you, Eve, for sending around the Everglades Coalition Conference link, which is evergladescoalition.org conference that's happening. I'm co-chairing that. So we'll hear some good history, but moving along into a lot of great panels and stuff. All right. Well, thanks again for everybody for attending this this Rivers Coalition meeting. We're looking forward to kind of continuing this conversation. Our next meeting will be February 25th at 11. And in between time, if there are things going on, please circulate it to Barbara. And I see Barbara and Bruce is in the background. Hey, Bruce, nice to see you. Thanks for attending the meeting, and thanks for all you do for Rivers Coalition. Let's keep our voices strong, keep it together, and circulate it amongst us to really have a good unified effort. And appreciate it very much. All right. Have a good day, guys. Take care.
Good weekend.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mark. Appreciate it.